government coming in and they will spend so much. All the money being spent on this project should have been put on primary services such as security, education, and health. I would like to a bit disagree with. I mean, not to really disagree, but actually shed more light on what Mr. Ekom said at the time, that security should be prioritized and what have you. We're actually looking at correcting the effects. What about going back to the cause? What brought about this insecurity is education. When UNESCO said 26% of the budget of a nation's budget should be spent on education, they know what they are doing. Go to the north. In Nigeria, for instance, to speak to you, we have over 10 million school-age children out of school in Nigeria. About over 9 million of them are from the north. That's to tell you why we have Boko Haram, so many soldiers and what have you in the north. What if those guys have been trained? The money government is spending on security and what have you right now, if it had been spent to educate those guys, this would have been prevented.
It's one thing to be in school, it's another thing to be taught the right thing.
Yes, so that's our curriculum.
That's we need to look at the issue of curriculum. That's good.
Yeah, going to you, he was talking about what UNESCO said about 26%, and there was the agreement in Abuja for 15% for health. If we say 15% for health of this budget, we should be talking about $1 trillion naira or thereabout. But
1.05.
The health sector has just a little above 300. How can the authorities, for instance, make good use of this little that we have?
Okay, so somehow I tend to want to, because I see us as a team on this panel, so each one of us can talk on different areas. I just want to come back on feedback. The government, the Minister of Budget and National Planning, actually convened detailed presentation of the budget in Abuja last week, Monday on the 19th. And one of the things that did at that was to give information on the performance of the 2016 budget. So it's probably not fair to say they don't want to know how has it gone. They gave specifics, and it's about 80% in terms of revenue, and no, 80% in terms of expenditure, and maybe about 70% in terms of revenue. What they've collected versus what they were supposed to collect, and all of that. But coming back to the global recommendations, it's based on evidence that if you make this kind of investment, like the gentleman said, Mr. Mabinori, the returns down the line, you have significant economic returns, not just as a social service, but real economic benefit. In vaccination, for instance, $1 spent on vaccination returns close to $14 or $16 from the figures of the people who have done the studies. And that's why the WHO encouraged that governments should spend 15% minimum of their general government expenditure, which is what we call the budget in a year, on health. And Nigeria hosted a summit of the African Union in 2001, committing itself to uphold that 15% allocation. Many times the federal government has things to learn from the states. States like Bauchi have made clear, consistent commitments. They're on 16% as of this year. So it's doable. It's not as if it's an abstract thing. They did 15% last year. But our government has not even set a trajectory. We know that, as Yoruba people will say, the water is more than the gari. We know there's a lot to contend with. But if you set yourself a trajectory and you're going to 15% in the course of your 4 years of administration, or 8 years, optimistically, and you say that it's not setting the right targets and trajectory. By the midterm, end of our tenure, we want to have reached 12% or 10%. And that's more incremental, you can do it. But our government has set no such trajectory, so we are on 4-something%. But more importantly, those are discretionary spendings. Laws that put in place statutory expenditure are not discretionary. They don't give the executive the power to decide whether they will implement them or not. They're binding. So right now, our government has been in breach of the law of the National Assembly called the National Health Act, which provides that not less than 1% of the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government should go to health. That would have come to, for instance, UBEC is a surrogate for that. UBEC is 2%, and UBEC is about 92 billion. So the 1% for health this year would have been about 46 billion. If you look at the increase that was made in the capital budget, it went from 28 billion in 2016 to 51 billion. That's a significant increase, about 30 something. That would have gone towards fulfilling what is legally binding.
Okay, now we all know that this is where we should be, but for this little that we have, for this 4%, if you were the Minister of Health, where would you focus your attention?
Primary health care is the place to focus. And I would like to come back to something Mr. Idahosa mentioned, which is that primary health care should be the responsibility of the government. Yes, in terms of setting the policies, in terms of giving the guidance on how to manage things, but in terms of the execution, there are models in Rwanda that show that universal health coverage can be achieved if you channel the health insurance, which is what the National Health Act, 50% of it would have gone, to service this thing. Now, service delivery, the recurrent budget of the Federal Ministry of Health is about 250 billion. So that's about 80% of the total budget. That can be offloaded in a way that the people become private. In Rwanda, there's a lot of private sector running the facilities. So government has built them. You can privatize them with controls. Community health nurses, midwives can manage those things more efficiently. They live in those communities, and government can redirect the funds that are saved from that area into more capital-oriented projects.
Okay, Mr. Komo, as we wind down, I'm going that way. How do we do?
Well, I think we have to, I don't know if somebody said it here a few minutes ago, have to rescript our economic system, our budget, how it's set up, how it's worked, the architecturing of it. I think we have to understand what our priorities really are, and it's something that needs to be thought through properly. This is not political speak. This is knowledge-based, and this is something which ought to be done by experts. I think they need to get a lot of experts to give them inputs even before they create the budget. The final budget is a political act. That's okay. That's the policy that comes out. But the input into the policy must be of an expert nature. And the reason I say that is, I just take some from what he said. He said the youth that's unemployed is the problem, or that should be focused in terms of education. Yes, I agree, that's useful, but we look at that and we call that a risk-based approach to mitigating security threats or security issues, because we have an existential problem. We have people shooting right now, killing people. I don't have 10 years, I don't have 15 years to wait to go and restructure the security, the educational system in the country to solve the problem. So it's an emergency. When your house is on fire, that's not the time to go and have a discussion about how to produce new fire extinguishers or better design. You first put out the fire in your house. And I'm saying right now, the first priority for this government should have been to focus, instead of the billions they put in some ministries that are not totally productive, they should have focused more on securing this country so that they can now bring them.
With a combination of the defense and interior grossing about 1 trillion naira.
20% of the budget.
It's not enough. Okay, so but we have this. What do we do with it? We have what we have. What do we do with it?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, my 800 billion of that is recurrent, just paying salaries. So I only have, that's what I said in my beginning, that only 200 billion capital is nothing, it's paltry. That won't even buy a boat. So you need to put your money where your mouth is. Okay. If we say security is important, then let's prioritize security. This is what we did. Why they said they voted money in those previous years, but there were environments, there were all kinds of things that ambushed this money and never really got into buying material.
Some more people will need to go to jail. Mr. Babino, we're winding down. Mr. Dosa, I'll end with you.
Okay. In my own opinion, just a little to stress more.
We're winding down.
Yes, I know. Fine, it's good to correct what in terms of security, spending more on security. But at the same time, as we are correcting, we can also be preventing. But for how long are we going to be correcting every time intervention into the security? So can't we go back to the basis? Okay, if it takes us the next 10 years correcting it, then what happens after 10 years? So let's go back to education.
Okay.
Change our curriculum, give people the right orientation. And,
okay.
the issue of security.
Mr. Dahosa.
Finally.
I have not wound down.
No, you have. We have to go. Mr. Dahosa.
No, I think really seriously, what the government should focus on is the policies that drive ease of business. The World Bank has a very simple template of a list of items. You mentioned Rwanda, you mentioned Singapore. All those countries just follow the list. If this government can faithfully pursue the ease of business guidelines, this economy will not just recover, it will grow. And that should be the focus.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Gabriel Dahosa, Ona Ekomu, Remy Addition, and Oladotun Mabi Nori. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us. We'll take a moment and Sunrise will be back. Please don't go away.